Espionage. It is a word that brings up images of sleek gadgets and shadowy figures in trench coats, people slipping through secure doors in modern cities. But the truth is, the Game of Secrets is far older than any spy novel or blockbuster movie. We are talking about thousands of years, long before microfilms or satellite surveillance. People have always needed to know what their enemies, rivals, or even allies were planning. Sometimes this knowledge meant the difference between a kingdom standing tall or crumbling to dust. It saved lives, won wars, and changed the course of history without a single battle being fought. Think about it. How old is this practice, really? Were there spies lurking in ancient markets, whispering secrets in forgotten tongues? Did empires rise and fall based on a hidden message carried by a disguised merchant? The answer is a resounding yes. The methods were different, sure. No high-tech listening devices, no encrypted digital messages. But the core mission was the same: gather information, influence outcomes, and survive. And the stakes were often much higher. No anonymous drone strikes, no diplomatic immunity. Getting caught usually meant a painful death. These weren't just soldiers or diplomats, they were masters of disguise, deception, and psychological warfare, operating in a world where rumor was currency and trust was a rare commodity. They were the original secret agents, and their stories are truly wild. These are not fictional heroes, though their tales often blur the line between history and legend. These were real people, or groups of people who played a dangerous game in a world that was unforgiving. We often think of modern intelligence agencies as complex, but the seeds of all their operations, all their tradecraft, were planted centuries ago. What did ancient spying look like? Who were these people? How did they manage to gather information in a world without instant communication? And what lessons can their lives teach us about the enduring human need for secrets and the power of knowing what others don't? We are going to look at 16 of these stories, some well-known, some more obscure, but all of them fascinating. Number 1, what was the ultimate secret weapon of the Mauryan Empire? Chanakya's agents, operating in ancient India around the 4th to 3rd century BCE, weren't just individuals, they were part of a sophisticated, state-sponsored intelligence network. The architect of this system was Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, the advisor to Emperor Chandragupta Maurya, who founded the Mauryan Empire. His famous treatise, the Arthashastra, is basically a textbook on statecraft, and a huge chunk of it is dedicated to espionage. It is startlingly detailed, laying out everything from recruitment to counterintelligence. Chanakya understood that information was power. He argued that spies were essential for maintaining internal security, managing foreign relations, and conducting war. He didn't just suggest using spies, he codified it into an intricate system. We are talking about a network that was meant to be everywhere, permeating all levels of society. The Arthashastra identifies several types of spies. There were the Kapatika Hatra, or fraudulent disciples, who were basically highly trained secret agents. They would pretend to be students or ascetics to gain trust and information. Then there were Udastira, or recluses, who would appear as hermits or monks, living outside the city but close enough to observe and report. Imagine a holy man on the outskirts of your town, peacefully meditating, but secretly noting every visitor, every strange shipment. Chanakya also employed Gripatika, or householders, who operated as farmers or merchants, blending into the common populace. These people would gather intelligence on local sentiment, potential rebellions, or economic issues. And then there were Vaidahaka, who were disguised as traders, moving across borders and bringing back intelligence on foreign kingdoms. They might pretend to be selling spices or jewels, but their real cargo was information. Even women were recruited, often as bhiksuki or mendicant women, who could move freely and listen to gossip in households, or parivrajika, who were ascetic women. This shows a remarkably progressive understanding of intelligence gathering for the time, recognizing the unique access certain social roles could provide. The spies weren't just observers, they were also used for covert operations, including assassination, spreading disinformation, and influencing public opinion. Chanakya even discusses how to identify and neutralize enemy spies, essentially writing the first counterintelligence manual. The book suggests using double agents, feeding false information, and setting traps for foreign agents. Scholars like R.P. Kangle, who translated the Arthashastra into English, have highlighted how revolutionary this text was. It shows a level of strategic thinking about espionage that was far ahead of its time. The Mauryan Empire, which stretched across much of the Indian subcontinent, was one of the largest empires of the ancient world. Many historians believe that its stability and expansion were heavily reliant on the sophisticated intelligence network. The empire lasted from about 322 BCE to 185 BCE, a significant period, and its founder, Chandragupta, famously overthrew the Nanda Empire, an achievement often attributed to Chanakya's strategic genius, including his use of spies. These agents would report directly to a central intelligence bureau, which would then pass the compiled information to the king. The system emphasized verification cross-referencing reports from multiple sources to ensure accuracy. This is a practice still central to modern intelligence work. They even had methods for monitoring government officials, preventing corruption and disloyalty within their own ranks. Imagine having spies watching the spies, and then spies watching those spies. It was a complex web designed for total control and information dominance. The Arthashastra also details the ethical, or rather, unethical considerations. It advises the king to be ruthless and pragmatic in the use of spies, prioritizing state security above all else. This isn't about morality, it's about power. It's a chilling reminder that the principles of intelligence, deception, and realpolitik are ancient. What we still don't know, how much of the Arthashtra's detailed spy network was actually implemented. Were there specific legendary agents whose names are lost to history? How effective was it really at preventing internal dissent versus crushing it after it started? Number 2. How did a harlot in Jericho save a nation? Rahab's story is found in the biblical book of Joshua around the 14th century BCE. It's a compelling tale of courage, deception, and a pivotal moment in ancient history. The Israelites, led by Joshua, were poised to enter the Promised Land. Jericho was their first major obstacle, a fortified city with formidable walls. Before launching an attack, Joshua sent 2 spies to scout the city. This was a critical mission. They needed to understand Jericho's defenses, its vulnerabilities, and the morale of its people. The spies entered Jericho, and perhaps because it offered anonymity or simply for lodging, they went to the house of Rahab, a harlot. Her profession meant her house was likely a place where many people came and went, making her less conspicuous and potentially a source of information herself. This detail is important because it suggests a certain level of worldliness and an understanding of the city's underbelly. However, their presence was noticed. The king of Jericho heard that Israelite spies had entered his city and had gone to Rahab's house. He immediately sent soldiers to apprehend them. This is where Rahab makes her fateful decision. Instead of turning the spies over, she hid them. She took them up to the roof and concealed them under stalks of flax that were laid out to dry. When the king's men arrived, she lied to them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from, and they left at dusk, just before the city gate was closed. If you hurry, you might catch them." She then sent the soldiers on a wild goose chase towards the Jordan River. After the king's men had left, Rahab went back to the spies. She made a pact with them. She told them that the people of Jericho were terrified of the Israelites. They had heard about the miracles God had done for them, how he parted the Red Sea, and helped them defeat powerful kings. This intelligence was invaluable to Joshua. It told him that the morale inside Jericho was low, a key factor for any besieging army. In return for her help, Rahab asked the spies to swear an oath that when the Israelites conquered Jericho, they would spare her and her family. The spies agreed, telling her to tie a scarlet cord in her window. This would be the sign for the Israelite army to identify her house and protect everyone inside. They then escaped by being lowered down from her window, which was built into the city wall itself, and fled to the hills for 3 days before returning to Joshua. Rahab's actions were incredibly risky. If caught, she would have faced execution for treason. Her motivation, some biblical scholars argue, was not just fear but also a growing faith in the Israelite God, having heard of his power. Her intelligence was crucial. The spies reported back to Joshua, confirming the fear gripping the city and giving him confidence to proceed with the unconventional siege strategy. When the Israelites eventually marched around Jericho, and the walls famously fell, Rahab and her family were spared. Joshua chapter 6 verse 25 explicitly states, "But Rahab the prostitute and her family and all who belonged to her, Joshua spared. And she has lived among the Israelites to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho." This act of espionage and betrayal of her own city led to her becoming an ancestor of King David and eventually Jesus, according to Christian tradition. This is a significant point in the narrative of salvation history. Historians and archaeologists, while often debating the exact historicity of biblical narratives, do find evidence of ancient Jericho as a fortified city. Kathleen Kenyon's excavations in the mid-20th century provided significant insights into the city's defenses. While not directly confirming Rahab's story, the context of a heavily walled city fits the biblical description. The story of Rahab is a powerful example of how an individual's courageous decision, driven by both self-preservation and a calculated assessment of power, could drastically impact a military campaign and change the course of history. What we still don't know, what was Rahab's true motivation? Was it purely tactical, spiritual, or a mix of both? How common was it for people within a city to betray it for personal gain or perceived greater good? Were there other informants in Jericho that history simply didn't record? Number 3, did ancient Spartan soldiers also work as secret police? The Krypteia of ancient Sparta, from roughly the 5th to 4th century BCE, was not a spy agency in the traditional sense of gathering foreign intelligence. Instead, it was a brutal, secretive institution of internal state security and social control operating on the darkest edges of Spartan society. It was designed to terrorize and suppress the Helots, the enslaved population that vastly outnumbered the free Spartans. The Helots were the agricultural workforce of Sparta. They were essentially serfs, tied to the land, and their constant labor freed Spartans to train as full-time soldiers. But their subjugation was a constant source of fear for the Spartans. The Helots outnumbered the Spartans by as much as 7 to 1, or even 10 to 1 according to some ancient estimates, like those from Thucydides, the Athenian historian. This massive numerical disparity meant that the threat of Helot revolt was ever present, a nightmare for the Spartan elite. To manage this existential threat, the Spartans developed institutions like the Krypteia. Young Spartan men, typically those who had completed their rigorous ago, the Spartan training system, but had not yet entered full manhood, were selected for the Krypteia. These youth, sometimes called Kryptoi, were dispatched into the countryside, often at night, without provisions or visible weapons. They were essentially turned loose in order to survive by their wits, to live off the land, and to, most importantly, murder any Helot they deemed rebellious or even just too robust and strong. Plutarch, in his Life of Lycurgus, describes the Krypteia in chilling detail. He writes that the Spartan ephors magistrates would formally declare war on the Helots each year. This annual declaration was a legalistic loophole. It allowed any Spartan to kill a Helot without facing charges of murder or pollution, turning the act of suppression into a sanctioned military operation. This declaration essentially depersonalized the killings, making them a state duty. The Kryptoi would hide by day and emerge at night to ambush Helots. They would particularly target those Helots who were considered outstanding in terms of physique, spirit, or intelligence. The idea was to eliminate potential leaders, to instill pervasive fear, and to constantly remind the Helot population of their precarious existence. It was a form of psychological warfare, a constant, unpredictable threat designed to prevent any organized resistance before it could even begin. This wasn't about intelligence gathering for a military campaign against a foreign enemy. It was about social engineering through terror. It was about preventing internal collapse. The Krypteia also likely served as a final test of a young Spartan's cunning, toughness, and ruthlessness. It was a brutal initiation into the harsh realities of maintaining Spartan power. Historians like Paul Cartledge, a leading scholar on Sparta, have extensively analyzed the Krypteia, placing it within the broader context of Spartan militarism and Helot control. He emphasizes that while ancient sources might sensationalize some aspects, the core function of the Krypteia as a terroristic instrument is well supported. It wasn't a secret police force in the modern sense, but a clandestine execution squad and intelligence gathering body focused solely on the Helot population. The very secrecy of the Krypteia also made it a kind of intelligence gathering mechanism. By living among the Helots or observing them from afar, the Kryptoi would also report on any unusual movements, gatherings, or signs of unrest. Their eyes and ears were on the ground, but their primary directive was lethal force. This makes them a dark, disturbing example of ancient internal espionage and state control. The existence of the Krypteia highlights the fundamental tension at the heart of Spartan society. their need for Helot labor for their unique military system, and their deep-seated fear of Helot rebellion. It's a stark reminder of the lengths ancient states would go to maintain power, even if it meant sanctioned murder of their own subjugated people. Well, we still don't know how many Spartans participated in the Krypteia annually. What were the psychological effects on the young men who were forced to participate in such brutal acts? Was there ever any organized resistance against the Krypteia by the Helots, or was the terror too effective? Number 4, how did the king's eyes and ears keep a massive empire in line? The Achaemenid Persian Empire, which spanned from the 6th to 4th century BCE, was one of the largest and most powerful empires the ancient world had ever seen. It stretched from modern-day Turkey through the Middle East into parts of North Africa and India. Governing such a vast and diverse territory required more than just military might. It demanded an incredibly effective system of administration and control. A key component of this system was the network of royal inspectors and intelligence gatherers, often referred to as the king's eyes and ears. These agents were known in Old Persian as Hazarapathesis, or by other terms indicating their royal authority. They were dispatched directly by the great King Darius I, Xerxes I, and their successors to various satrapies provinces of the empire. Their mission was clear report on the conduct of the satraps, provincial governors, military commanders, and other officials. They were essentially internal auditors, intelligence officers, and troubleshooters all rolled into one. Herodotus, the Greek historian, writing in the 5th century BCE, offers accounts of the Persian system. He describes how these eyes and ears would travel through the empire, often unannounced, observing, listening, and gathering information. They would check on tax collection, ensure justice was administered properly, inspect military garrisons, and assess the loyalty of local leaders. They were independent of the satraps, reporting directly and solely to the king. This direct line to the monarch was crucial. It prevented provincial governors from consolidating too much power or engaging in rebellion without the king knowing. Think about the logistical challenge. The empire was huge. To send out agents who could travel effectively, observe accurately, and report back reliably over such distances required incredible organization. The famous Persian Royal Road, a network of well-maintained highways with regular way stations, played a crucial role in enabling these agents, along with royal messengers, to travel quickly and efficiently. Xenophon, another Greek historian, also mentions the efficiency of the Persian postal system and its role in transmitting information. These agents weren't just looking for corruption or disloyalty, they were also gathering general intelligence on the well-being of the provinces, agricultural output, trade routes, and potential external threats. This constant flow of information allowed the king to make informed decisions, react quickly to problems, and maintain a tight grip on his sprawling domain. The authority of the king's eyes and ears was immense. They held the power to investigate, to bring charges, and to ultimately report back to the king, whose word was absolute. A bad report could mean the downfall or even execution of a powerful satrap. This created a climate of constant scrutiny and accountability, ensuring that officials, no matter how powerful, remained loyal and efficient. Modern scholarship, including works by A.T. Olmsted in History of the Persian Empire, or studies by Pierre Briand, analyzes the administrative genius of the Achaemenids. They highlight that the king's eyes and ears were more than just spies. They were an institutionalized form of quality control and oversight that helped maintain the coherence of a multi-ethnic, multicultural empire for over 2 centuries. Without such a robust intelligence and inspection system, the sheer scale of the Persian Empire would have likely led to its fragmentation much sooner. These agents were a silent but ever-present force. Their existence ensured that even in the most remote corners of the empire, the king's authority was felt and his will was enforced. They were a testament to the fact that even in ancient times, effective governance relied on good information gathered by dedicated anonymous agents. What we still don't know, what were the specific training methods for these agents? Were there famous eyes and ears who achieved legendary status, or were they intentionally kept anonymous? How did they manage to maintain secrecy and avoid detection in provinces where they might be strangers? Number 5, were Roman grain merchants actually secret agents? The frumentari of the Roman Empire, flourishing from the 1st to the 3rd century CE, represent a fascinating evolution in ancient intelligence gathering. Initially, they were exactly what their name suggests. Frumentari literally means grain men. Their primary role was to procure and transport grain for the Roman legions and for the city of Rome itself. This was a massive logistical undertaking, requiring them to travel extensively across the vast empire, visiting different provinces and interacting with countless people. However, over time, their role transformed. The Roman emperors, always wary of plots, rebellions, and the loyalty of their provincial governors, realized the unique potential of these traveling grain merchants. Their legitimate travel and interaction with local populations, from ports to marketplaces to administrative centers, provided perfect cover for intelligence gathering. Who would suspect a humble grain dealer of being an imperial spy? So the Frumentari were gradually co-opted into an internal intelligence service for the emperor. They became the emperor's eyes and ears within the empire, reporting directly on a wide range of issues. This included tracking disloyal officials, investigating potential insurrections, monitoring public opinion, and even carrying out arrests or delivering secret messages. Think about the advantages of this cover. A frumentarius could legitimately ask questions about local harvest yields, the availability of supplies, or market prices. These seemingly innocuous conversations could reveal a lot about the economic stability of a region, the satisfaction of the populace, or the administrative efficiency or corruption of the local governor. They could travel unhindered, carrying official papers that granted them passage and blend in almost anywhere. Historians like Peter Heather in his work on Roman imperial administration, and others like Richard Talbert, who map out the Roman world, highlight the unique position of the Frumentari. They became a crucial tool for emperors like Hadrian and Diocletian in maintaining central control over the sprawling empire. Their network allowed the emperor to bypass the official administrative channels and receive independent reports, providing a check on the power of regional officials. However, their power also made them feared. Because they operated in secrecy and reported only to the emperor, they were often associated with arbitrary arrests, political purges, and the suppression of dissent. They were seen as agents of an autocratic regime, and their very name became synonymous with imperial oppression. This perception is evident in later Roman histories and epitaphs, where the role is mentioned with caution or even disdain. The use of the Frumentari reached its peak during the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, a period of significant imperial instability and frequent changes in emperors. The need for internal intelligence to identify threats to the throne was paramount. However, their reputation for ruthlessness and abuse of power eventually led to their downfall. Emperor Diocletian, who reorganized the Roman administration around the late 3rd century CE, is credited with disbanding the Frumentari. He replaced them with a new intelligence service, the agentes in rebuses, hosts who deal with affairs, who are also couriers but with a more formalized intelligence mandate and theoretically more oversight. This change suggests that even the Romans recognized the dangers of an unchecked, secretive internal police force. The Frumentari are a perfect example of an organization that evolved out of a mundane logistical need into a powerful and feared intelligence arm. Their story shows how ancient states adapted existing structures to meet intelligence demands, and how the effectiveness of such networks often came at the cost of public trust and personal liberty. What we still don't know, how many Frumentari were operating at any given time. What were the specific training methods they underwent to transition from grain suppliers to spies? Were there notable individuals among the Frumentari whose specific exploits were recorded, or were they intentionally erased from history due to their sinister reputation? Number 6. How did one man's personal network change the course of Rome? And Julius Caesar's intelligence network in the 1st century BCE was not a formalized state institution like the Frumentari, but a highly effective personal system that played a pivotal role in his military and political successes. Caesar was a master strategist, and he understood that information was just as vital as legions in achieving his ambitions. He cultivated an extensive array of informants, scouts, and even double agents. During his famous Gallic Wars, which he chronicled in Commentary de Bello Gallico Commentaries on the Gallic War, Caesar constantly emphasizes the importance of intelligence. He talks about sending out scouts, exploratories, and spies, speculators, to gather information on enemy movements, strengths, and intentions. These were not just standard military reconnaissance units. Caesar employed people who could penetrate enemy lines, understand local languages and customs, and report back reliably. He knew the terrain, the local politics, and the disposition of tribal leaders before his legions even marched. One striking aspect was his ability to gain intelligence from within enemy ranks. He exploited divisions among the Gallic tribes, turning some against others and using their internal conflicts to his advantage. He would often receive intelligence from Gallic chieftains who were either sympathetic to Rome or were looking for a powerful ally against their rivals. This human was crucial for his lightning campaigns and decisive victories, such as the Siege of Alesia against Vercingetorix. Caesar also understood the power of propaganda and psychological warfare, which often goes hand in hand with intelligence. He made sure that his own version of events, often portraying Gallic resistance as futile and Roman power as inevitable, circulated widely. This wasn't just about morale for his own troops, it was about influencing potential defectors and weakening enemy resolve. Beyond the battlefield, Caesar's political intelligence in Rome was equally impressive. He had a vast network of clients, allies, and paid informants. These individuals operated in the Senate, the Forum, and the bustling taverns, gathering gossip, political maneuvering, and information on his rivals. He was always one step ahead, anticipating moves from Pompey, Cicero, and the senatorial optimates. This allowed him to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, secure advantageous alliances, and ultimately seize power. Historians like Adrian Goldsworthy, in his biography Caesar, Life of a Colossus, emphasize Caesar's remarkable ability to cultivate loyalty and gather intelligence. He wasn't just a general, he was a political operative par excellence. His personal charm, generosity, and ruthless ambition helped him build a network that spanned both military and civilian life. He understood that information flowed through personal relationships, and he invested heavily in those connections. He even used cryptography, though, in a basic form. The Caesar cipher, a simple substitution cipher where each letter in the plaintext is replaced by a letter some fixed number of positions down the alphabet, is named after him. While its widespread use isn't definitively proven for complex communications, it shows an awareness of the need for secure messaging, especially for sensitive military orders or political directives. This is mentioned by Suetonius in his Lives of the 12 Caesars. Caesar's intelligence operations were not about creating a bureaucracy, they were about creating a personal, effective information-gathering machine. This personalized approach allowed for flexibility, adaptability, and an unparalleled ability to react to changing circumstances, whether on the plains of Gaul or in the political arenas of Rome. His downfall, the assassination, might even be seen as a failure of his intelligence network, or perhaps a moment where the sheer number of conspirators overwhelmed his ability to uncover the plot. What we still don't know, how much did Caesar personally pay for his informants, and where did the funds come from? What was the exact structure and size of his civilian intelligence network in Rome? Were there specific agents whose names are recorded who worked for him, or were they all anonymous? Number 7. How did a blind musician listen his way into history? The Shiquan was a legendary figure from ancient China, specifically the spring and autumn period, roughly 771 to 476 BCE. He was a court musician, and notably, he was blind. While not a spy in the modern sense of a covert agent gathering secrets for a state, Shiquan represents an early form of intelligence gathering through keen observation, listening, and an understanding of human nature, making him a unique ancient informant or advisor. His stories are recounted in various ancient Chinese texts, including the Zuozuan and Shiji records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian. These texts describe him as a highly intelligent and perceptive individual despite his lack of sight. Because he was a musician, often a revered position in ancient courts, he had privileged access to rulers and their advisors. He could be present during important discussions, feasts, and ceremonies without being seen as a direct threat or a political player. His blindness might have even made people underestimate him or speak more freely in his presence, assuming he couldn't see their intentions. Shiquan's unique skill was his exceptional hearing and his ability to interpret sounds. It is said he could discern truth from falsehood, loyalty from disloyalty, and even predict outcomes based on the nuances of voices, the cadences of speech, and the subtle sounds of the court environment. One famous anecdote involves him discerning the true character and intentions of various princes by their speech and laughter. He could hear the discord in a seemingly harmonious court, picking up on underlying tensions. For example, a story tells of Duke Ping of Jin, his lord, asking him to play a certain tune. Shiquan refused, saying it was an ominous melody that would bring misfortune. The duke insisted, and Shiquan played it. Later, a disaster indeed befell the duke. While such tales often blend history with legend, they underscore the belief in Shiquan's extraordinary perceptive abilities. He wasn't just a musician, he was a human lie detector and an oracle of sorts, providing crucial insights to his ruler. Another tale describes how he analyzed the sound of a battle drum. After listening, he could tell the Duke whether the battle would be won or lost based on the rhythm and quality of the drumming. This isn't about magical foresight, but about a deep understanding of human performance under pressure, physical, and psychological states, communicated through subtle, audible cues. His role was essentially that of an intelligence analyst and advisor, processing a wealth of auditory data that others would ignore. He understood that actions speak louder than words, but also that words, and the way they are spoken, carry immense weight. He was a master of nonverbal communication, even without sight. Scholars of ancient Chinese history and philosophy often point to figures like Shi Quan to illustrate the diverse ways intelligence was valued and gathered in early China. While Sun Tzu's art of war codified espionage into a military doctrine, figures like Shi Quan show how subtle, everyday observation by trusted individuals could also serve the ruler's need for information. He provided a unique perspective, free from the visual biases that might influence others, allowing him to perceive deeper truths. Shi Quan's story reminds us that intelligence gathering isn't just about cloak and dagger operations. It's also about keen observation, deep understanding of human psychology, and the ability to process subtle cues that others might miss. In an age without advanced technology, human perception, honed to an extraordinary degree, was itself a powerful tool. What we still don't know, how much of Shi Quan's legendary abilities are historical fact versus later embellishment. Did he actively seek out information beyond his role as a musician, or did it primarily come to him passively? Were there other blind advisors or sensory intelligence gatherers in other ancient cultures? Number 8. How did a legendary queen use deception to build an empire? Queen Semiramis is a figure shrouded in myth, often appearing in Assyrian and Babylonian legends, sometimes dated to the 9th century BCE, though her historicity is debated. She is often identified with the historical Assyrian queen Samiramat, who ruled as regent for her young son Adad Nirari III. Regardless of the exact historical overlap, the legends surrounding Semiramis depict her as a brilliant and ruthless ruler, a conqueror, and a master of cunning and deception, essentially, an ancient spy master in her own right. The stories of Semiramis, often recounted by Greek historians like Diodorus Siculus in his Bibliotheca Historica, portray her as a woman who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful figures of her time. One of the most famous tales involves her taking control after the death of her husband, King Ninus. According to the legend, she disguised herself as her son, the young king, to take command of the army. This act of disguise and deception allowed her to gain the loyalty of the troops and consolidate her power, presenting a unified front. Her methods of conquest were not always brute force. Legends describe her using elaborate stratagems and intelligence to conquer cities and expand her empire. For example, when besieging a difficult city, she would sometimes feign retreat, drawing out the enemy, only to launch a surprise attack from an unexpected direction. This required not only tactical genius, but also good intelligence on enemy movements and psychological manipulation. She understood how to create false impressions and exploit enemy assumptions. One particularly vivid legend involves her conquest of India. Faced with a massive Indian army that relied on war elephants, Semiramis is said to have ordered the construction of a large number of fake elephants. These were made from the hides of oxen sewn together, stuffed with straw, and mounted on camels. The idea was to create the illusion of having a powerful elephant corps, hoping to intimidate the enemy or at least confuse them, thus negating their advantage. While the outcome of this particular campaign varies in different tellings, some say she failed, others that she achieved partial success, the story highlights her willingness to use elaborate deception and psychological warfare, which are cornerstones of intelligence operations. She was not afraid to invent facts to gain an advantage. Her intelligence gathering would have relied on a network of informants and scouts, much like other ancient rulers. She would have needed to understand the strengths and weaknesses of her opponents, the terrain, and the morale of the enemy forces. Given the scale of her legendary conquests, she must have had effective means of gathering this crucial information. Modern scholars, while cautious about the fantastical elements of the Semiramis legends, often acknowledge that such stories reflect ancient perceptions of powerful female rulers who operated outside conventional norms. They show that cleverness, strategic thinking, and the use of deception were recognized as powerful tools for governance and conquest, particularly for a woman in a male-dominated world. The very existence of these legends points to a deep-seated appreciation, and perhaps fear, of intelligence and cunning in ancient warfare and politics. Semiramis, whether historical or legendary, embodies the ancient ideal of a ruler who understood that power was not just about force, but also about knowledge, manipulation, and the art of the unexpected. She represents the archetype of a leader who actively engaged in intelligence and counterintelligence, not just as a side activity, but as a central pillar of her rule. What we still don't know, what specific historical basis, if any, do the more elaborate tales of deception attributed to Semiramis have? How accurate were the Greek accounts of her exploits, given their likely biases against powerful foreign queens? Were there actual historical precedents for using animal disguises or other forms of large-scale military deception in the Assyrian Empire? Number 9. How did Egypt's final queen keep her grip on power? Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt, ruled from 51 to 30 BCE. Her story is one of the most famous and dramatic in ancient history, deeply intertwined with the Roman Republic's power struggles. While often romanticized for her beauty and relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, Cleopatra was an incredibly astute and pragmatic ruler. A key part of her statecraft was a sophisticated intelligence network that helped her maintain power in a tumultuous period. Cleopatra understood that information was crucial for her survival and for Egypt's independence. She was known to be highly educated, fluent in multiple languages, and a shrewd politician. This meant she could directly engage with diverse sources of information without relying on intermediaries, giving her a significant advantage. She needed to know what was happening in Rome, in Alexandria, and among her own court. Her intelligence gathering focused on several areas. First, political maneuvering in Rome. With her kingdom constantly under the shadow of Roman expansion, Cleopatra needed to be fully aware of the shifting alliances, rivalries, and ambitions of Roman leaders. She cultivated strong personal relationships with powerful Romans like Caesar and Antony, which provided her with direct access to intelligence from the very heart of the Roman Republic. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was also a direct pipeline for crucial political information. She used her relationships to gather intelligence, not just for personal gain, but for the survival of her kingdom. Second, internal stability. Egypt itself was a multi-ethnic society with potential for unrest. Cleopatra would have employed a network of informants within her own kingdom to monitor potential rebellions, disloyal officials, and public sentiment. The Ptolemaic court was often a nest of intrigue, and she needed to be constantly vigilant against plots from within her own family or among her powerful courtiers. Third, military intelligence. Egypt was often involved in border skirmishes or needed to prepare for potential Roman invasions. Her intelligence network would have gathered information on enemy troop movements, naval strength, and logistical capabilities. This would have included scouts along her borders and agents within neighboring territories. Sources like Plutarch's Life of Antony and Cassius Dio's Roman history portray Cleopatra as a ruler who was acutely aware of the political climate and was constantly strategizing. Her famed ability to charm and persuade was not merely a personal trait, it was a diplomatic and intelligence tool. She used her intelligence to anticipate political shifts, make strategic alliances, and attempt to secure Egypt's future. Her presence in Rome during Caesar's time, for example, allowed her to observe Roman politics firsthand and gather invaluable insights. Cleopatra also made use of a sophisticated administration in Alexandria, which included record-keeping and possibly cryptographic methods for secure communication. Her wealth allowed her to fund these operations, employing agents and maintaining a communication network. She was probably aware of the use of codes or hidden messages, as these techniques were known in the ancient world, e.g., the citale used by Spartans. Her ultimate failure to save Egypt from Roman annexation was not due to a lack of intelligence, but rather the overwhelming military and political might of Octavian, later Augustus. Even then, she tried to use her intelligence and diplomatic skills in her final days, reportedly sending messages to Octavian and attempting to negotiate for her children's future, even as she prepared for her suicide. Cleopatra's reign is a testament to the fact that even a queen facing the might of an empire relied heavily on intelligence to navigate a dangerous world. She was not just a symbol of beauty and power, she was a calculating intelligence operative, using every tool at her disposal to protect her throne and her people. What we still don't know, what were the specific codes or methods of secure communication Cleopatra used? Were there any specific individuals who served as her primary intelligence gatherers, and what were their backgrounds? How effective was her internal intelligence network at preventing plots against her, and how many did it uncover? Number 10. How did an empress like Livia Drusilla wield power without an army? Livia Drusilla, the wife of Emperor Augustus and mother of Emperor Tiberius, was one of the most powerful women in the Roman Empire from the 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE. While she never held official political power in her own right, she exerted immense influence behind the scenes. A key tool in her subtle but formidable power play was an extensive private intelligence network. She didn't have legions, but she had information. Livia's role was primarily that of a consort and matriarch, but she was also a shrewd politician and survivor. She understood the cutthroat nature of Roman imperial politics and the constant threat of rivals, conspiracies, and ambitious courtiers. To protect herself, her family, and to advance her own agenda, she cultivated an elaborate network of informants, confidantes, and agents. Her intelligence gathering was focused almost entirely on the Roman elite, the Senate, the imperial household, and influential families. She needed to know who was loyal, who was ambitious, who was plotting, and what was being said in the private chambers and public forums. This was not about foreign espionage, but about navigating the treacherous internal landscape of Roman power. The ancient historians, particularly Tacitus in his Annals and Cassius Dio in Roman history, often depict Livia as a formidable and sometimes ruthless figure. They recount instances where she was suspected of influencing imperial decisions, orchestrating political eliminations, and even poisoning rivals to ensure the succession of her son Tiberius. While some of these accounts are likely exaggerated or tinged with anti-Livia bias, they underscore the widespread belief in her pervasive influence and her ability to manipulate events from the shadows. Her agents would have been diverse. They could have been slaves within aristocratic households who, through their daily duties, overheard conversations and observed private behaviors. They might have been freedmen who owed allegiance to her, working in various administrative capacities, or they could have been high-ranking individuals who were personally loyal to her or sought her patronage. These individuals would have fed her a constant stream of information, allowing her to anticipate challenges, counterplots, and subtly guide Augustus's decisions. Livia's network was effective because of its discretion and its depth. Information that passed through official channels could be filtered or distorted, but Livia sought out raw, unfiltered intelligence. Her access to Augustus, her husband, meant she could present this information directly to him, often influencing his judgment without appearing to overtly interfere in politics. This allowed her to wield immense power without holding any formal office, a remarkable feat in the patriarchal Roman world. For example, when Augustus was considering various heirs, Livia was seen as a staunch advocate for Tiberius. Her ability to sideline other potential heirs through political maneuvering, or as some historians suggest, more sinister means, likely relied on her intelligence network identifying weaknesses, spreading rumors, or presenting compelling evidence against rivals. Scholars like Susan E. Wood, who examines women in Roman imperial politics, emphasize that Livia's power was not just a result of her position as Augustus's wife, but also her sharp intellect and her ability to build and maintain a sophisticated web of influence and information. She operated within the strictures of Roman society, but she found ways to bend them to her will, largely through the effective use of intelligence. She was a master of the information game, thriving in a world where secrets could make or break dynasties. What we still don't know who were the specific individuals in Livia's private intelligence network. How much of the historical accusations against her, e.g., poisoning, were based on solid intelligence versus rumor and political slander? Were there specific instances where her intelligence directly averted a crisis for Augustus or her family? Or number 11, who were the secret emissaries that kept the pharaoh's empire together? During the New Kingdom of Egypt, particularly under pharaohs like Thutmose III, reigned c. 1479 to 1425 BCE, the Egyptian Empire reached its peak, stretching far beyond the Nile Valley into Nubia and the Near East. Governing such a vast territory, particularly the rebellious vassal states in Canaan and Syria, required constant vigilance and an active intelligence gathering apparatus. The pharaohs of this era utilized secret emissaries or hidden agents to maintain control and gather information. Thutmose III, known as the Napoleon of Egypt for his military conquests, understood that maintaining an empire wasn't just about winning battles, it was about preventing them. He undertook numerous campaigns into the Levant, establishing Egyptian dominance. But once conquered, these territories had to be managed. This is where his intelligence network came into play. These secret emissaries were not necessarily a formal, named institution like the Frumentari, but rather a functional component of the royal administration. They would have been trusted officials, scribes, or even merchants dispatched from Egypt into the vassal cities. Their legitimate purpose might have been to deliver royal decrees, collect tribute, or oversee public works. But their real mission was to observe, listen, and report back to the pharaoh. Their intelligence gathering focus would have been multifaceted. They would monitor the loyalty of local rulers, looking for any signs of dissent, unauthorized alliances, or plotting against Egyptian rule. They would assess the military capabilities of these vassal states, noting troop numbers, fortifications, and access to resources. They would also report on the general sentiment of the populace, economic conditions, and any external threats from neighboring powers. The Amarna Letters, a collection of diplomatic correspondence written on clay tablets from the 14th century BCE, provide a fascinating glimpse into this period. These letters exchanged between Egyptian pharaohs like Amenhotep III and Akhenaten and their vassal rulers in the Near East often contain pleas from the vassals for Egyptian military support against other rebellious cities or invading groups. Crucially, these letters also show the pharaohs demanding detailed information from their vassals, and sometimes expressing displeasure at a lack of compliance. It's clear the pharaohs had their own sources to verify these claims and cross-reference information. Historians and Egyptologists like James Henry Breasted in his Ancient Records of Egypt, and more modern scholars such as Eric H. Klein, who studies the Late Bronze Age Aegean and Near East, highlight the sophisticated administrative and diplomatic systems of the New Kingdom. The pharaoh's power was maintained not just by garrisons, but by a constant flow of information. The ability to identify rebellious factions early or to play one vassal against another relied heavily on good intelligence. These emissaries would travel discreetly, often using the existing trade routes and diplomatic channels. They would be skilled in observation and interrogation, able to extract information without arousing suspicion. Their reports would have been sent back to the pharaoh via fast couriers, ensuring that the central administration in Memphis or Thebes was always well informed. The sheer logistical effort to manage an empire of that size meant that reliable intelligence was a necessity, not a luxury. The role of these secret emissaries was about maintaining the stability and security of a vast colonial empire. By monitoring distant provinces, they ensured that the pharaoh's authority was respected and that any nascent rebellion could be crushed before it grew into a serious threat. It was a proactive approach to imperial governance, driven by the understanding that knowledge was the ultimate guarantor of power. What we still don't know, what specific training did these emissaries receive? How were they recruited and vetted for loyalty? Were there specific famous missions or successful intelligence coups attributed to these agents beyond the general historical record? Number 12. Did the Trojan horse have a human equivalent for intelligence? Homer's Dolon is a character from the Iliad, an epic poem from ancient Greece, usually attributed to the 8th century BCE, though it describes events from the Bronze Age around 12th century BCE. Dolon was a Trojan scout and spy who, while a fictional character, embodies the ancient Greek understanding of espionage and reconnaissance during wartime. His story provides a glimpse into the dangers and perceived foolishness of individual intelligence missions. In Book 10 of the Iliad, during a lull in the fighting, both the Achaeans, Greeks, and the Trojans are desperate for intelligence. Hector, the Trojan prince and commander, offers a significant reward Achilles' horses and chariot to any man brave enough to sneak into the Achaean camp and gather information on their plans and positions. Dolon, a swift but rather unheroic Trojan, volunteers. Dolon's mission is a classic intelligence gathering operation: infiltrate the enemy lines, observe, and report back. He dresses in a wolfskin, apparently, to blend into the night or to mimic a predatory animal, and carries a javelin. He sets off stealthily, intending to learn if the Achaeans plan to flee or continue the fight, and which guards are on duty. However, the Achaeans also have their own plan for intelligence. Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, and Diomedes, a formidable warrior, are sent on a similar mission into the Trojan camp. They spot Dolon first, moving alone between the camps. They lay in wait and ambush him. Terrified, Dolon is captured. He immediately breaks down and offers to tell Odysseus and Diomedes everything he knows about the Trojan forces, their dispositions, their allies, and their plans in exchange for his life. He reveals crucial intelligence that the Trojan camp is divided by nationality, that the Thracian allies have just arrived and are camped separately, and that their king Rhesus has magnificent horses, the very ones Hector promised him. He even identifies Hector's current location and the plans of the Trojan leadership. Odysseus and Diomedes extract all the intelligence they need. They then brutally kill Dolon. They do not honor their implicit promise to spare his life, viewing him as an enemy spy who deserved no mercy. They then use the information Dolon provided to raid the Thracian camp, killing King Rhesus and stealing his prize horses, inflicting significant damage and boosting Achaean morale. Dolon is not a successful spy. He is a cautionary tale, a weak character who succumbs under pressure. But his role in the narrative emphasizes the critical role intelligence played even in mythical ancient warfare. It also highlights the moral ambiguity surrounding espionage, the willingness to deceive, betray, and then dispose of the source. Scholars of classical literature, like Geoffrey Kirk in his commentaries on the Iliad, often discuss Book 10, the Doloneia, as a later addition or a separate poetic tradition, but its inclusion in the canonical Iliad speaks to its importance. It shows that ancient Greek audiences understood and appreciated the role of cunning and intelligence, not just brute force in military conflict. Stallone, though a tragic figure, is immortalized as one of the earliest examples of a spy in Western literature, a man whose brief moment in the spotlight revealed secrets that altered the course of a legendary war. What we still don't know how much of Dolan's story reflects actual practices of individual espionage during the Bronze Age or later Greek periods. Were there historical figures in Greek warfare who attempted similar solo intelligence missions? How did ancient armies typically verify information gathered from captured spies, given the risk of deception? Number 13. How did the Spartans send secret messages that only they could read? The Spartan decryption. Agents in their use of the sidetal, pronounced skit, li, are fascinating examples of ancient secure communication and intelligence during the Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE. While not individual spies in the traditional sense, the sidetal was a crucial tool for Spartan commanders and leaders, enabling them to send secret messages that were difficult for enemies to intercept and understand. It was the ancient world's equivalent of a field cipher device. The sidetal was a simple but effective piece of cryptographic technology. It consisted of two parts, a cylindrical rod of a specific diameter and a strip of parchment or leather. To send a secret message, the sender would tightly wrap the strip of parchment around their sidetal rod, and then they would write their message lengthwise along the rod so that each letter was on a different segment of the parchment. Once the message was written, the parchment would be unwound and the letters would appear scrambled and unintelligible to anyone without the matching rod. To decrypt the message, the recipient needed an identical sidetal rod with precisely the same diameter as the sender's. They would wrap the parchment strip around their rod, and the letters would align correctly, revealing the original message. Without the correct rod, the message was simply a jumble of seemingly random letters. This method was particularly useful for Spartan military commanders, like Lysander, who spearheaded Spartan victories in the latter stages of the Peloponnesian War. Lysander was known for his cunning and strategic mind. The sidetal allowed him to communicate securely with the Spartan ephors, magistrates, and other generals, especially when operating far from Sparta, such as in the Aegean Sea. Sensitive information, military orders, and strategic intelligence could be exchanged without fear of enemy interception, or at least without fear of immediate decryption. Plutarch, in his Life of Lysander, describes the sidetal and its use. He notes that the ephors would keep one part of the sidetal, and the general sent abroad would be given the matching part. This ensured that only authorized personnel could send and receive secure communications. It was a basic form of symmetric key cryptography, where both sender and receiver share the same K, the rod's diameter. The sidetal was a practical solution to a critical problem: how to maintain command and control over distant military operations in an age without electronic communication. In a world where messages were carried by human messengers, who could be captured, bribed, or intercepted, the ability to send an encrypted message was invaluable. If a messenger was captured, the enemy would obtain a scrambled text, but hopefully not the intelligence itself. This secure communication method was essentially an extension of Spartan intelligence operations. It protected the intelligence that was being gathered and transmitted. It meant that battlefield plans, reports on enemy movements, or instructions for Diplomatic negotiations could be passed with a degree of secrecy unmatched by open messages. Modern cryptology historians, like David Kahn and the Codebreakers, often cite the Cytale as one of the earliest recorded examples of a transposition cipher. It demonstrates an early understanding of the principles of cryptography and its importance in military and state affairs. The Spartans, often stereotyped as purely martial, also recognized the subtle power of information and its protection. Their decryption agents were not just individuals, but anyone entrusted with the Cytale and the crucial task of ensuring secure intelligence flow. What we still don't know, how many different Cytale rod diameters were in use at any given time. Were there instances where an enemy captured a Cytale and managed to reverse engineer its diameter? How effective was the Cytale against a determined and clever enemy who might try multiple rod sizes to break the code? And number 14, how did a prophet identify spies in ancient Israel? Moses' spies from the biblical book of Numbers around the 15th, 14th century BCE represent one of the earliest and most detailed accounts of a reconnaissance mission in recorded history. This wasn't a stealthy infiltration by a few agents, but a broad, organized intelligence-gathering operation commanded by Moses himself. The mission was pivotal to scout the land of Canaan, which God had promised the Israelites before they attempted to conquer it. Moses, under divine instruction, sent out 12 men, one leader from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. This wasn't a covert mission in the usual sense. These were prominent tribal representatives. This mission took place over 40 days. The spies traveled from the desert of Zin all the way to Rehob, near Lebo Hamath, covering a significant portion of what is now Israel and Lebanon. They saw powerful fortified cities, fertile lands, and encountered the local inhabitants, described as strong and giant-like, including the Anakites. They even cut down a single cluster of grapes so large that it required 2 men to carry it on a pole, along with pomegranates and figs, to demonstrate the land's incredible fertility. Upon their return, the 12 spies reported back to Moses and the entire Israelite community. Their intelligence was consistent on the land's richness. However, their interpretations of the people and cities differed dramatically, leading to a crisis of morale. 10 of the spies, overwhelmed by fear, gave a negative report. They focused on the strength of the inhabitants and the impregnability of their cities. The people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large, they reported. We even saw Anakites there. We can't attack those people, they are stronger than we are. They even declared, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. This was a classic intelligence failure, good data but disastrous interpretation driven by fear and lack of faith. Only 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, who would later succeed Moses, gave a positive, faith-filled report. They acknowledged the challenges but insisted that the Israelites could indeed conquer the land. We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it, Caleb declared. The differing reports caused mass panic among the Israelites. They wept, grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and even considered choosing a new leader to take them back to Egypt. This rebellion, fueled by the negative intelligence report, led to divine judgment. The entire generation, except for Caleb and Joshua, was condemned to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for each day the spies were in Canaan, until that unbelieving generation died out. This story, studied by biblical scholars and historians of ancient Israel, underscores the profound impact of intelligence, or misinterpretation of it, on military and national decisions. It shows a sophisticated understanding of reconnaissance, requiring detailed observation and reporting. It also reveals the psychological dimension of intelligence, how morale and faith can influence the reception and interpretation of even accurate information. The event of Moses' spies is a foundational narrative in Israelite history, emphasizing the consequences of fear and faith in the face of daunting challenges. It highlights how leadership must carefully manage the intelligence it receives, not just in its collection, but in its presentation and interpretation to the populace. What we still don't know, what were the specific routes taken by the 12 spies? Did they use any forms of disguise or deception to gather information, or did they rely on overt observation? What impact did this mission have on the development of Israelite military intelligence practices in later periods? Number 15, did the ancient world use peace missions as cover for spying? Xerxes' scouts during the Achaemenid Persian Wars, early 5th century BCE, were an integral part of his massive military machine. While not spies in the sense of deep cover agents infiltrating enemy territory for long periods, Xerxes made extensive use of scouts, messengers, and intelligence-gathering missions, often under diplomatic or observational pretext, to prepare for his colossal invasion of Greece. His campaign was perhaps the largest military undertaking of the ancient world, and it required an unprecedented amount of logistical planning and intelligence. Xerxes, the great king of Persia, inherited his father Darius I's ambition to conquer Greece. Before launching such an enormous expedition, Herodotus estimates his forces in the millions, though modern historians usually put it in the hundreds of thousands. He needed to gather vast amounts of information. This wasn't just about general knowledge, it was about specific, actionable intelligence. Herodotus, in his histories, recounts how Xerxes sent envoys to various Greek city-states demanding earth and water, symbols of submission. While these were diplomatic missions, they also served as crucial intelligence-gathering operations. The envoys would observe the defenses of the cities, gauge the sentiment of the people, assess their military capabilities, and identify potential allies or enemies. They would also note the terrain, resources, and lines of communication. These diplomatic missions were essentially a reconnaissance in force, gathering overt intelligence under a veneer of negotiation. Beyond these diplomatic forays, Xerxes dispatched dedicated scouts to map out the routes, particularly the challenging terrain of Thrace and Macedonia, which lay between the Hellespont and Greece proper. They would identify sources of water, potential camping grounds for a vast army, and suitable locations for supplies. The famous canal dug through the Athos Peninsula and the bridge of boats across the Hellespont were massive logistical feats that required extensive prior scouting and engineering intelligence. These weren't spontaneous decisions. They were the result of meticulous planning based on intelligence. Xerxes also famously sent agents to spy on the Greek preparations. For example, he sent a scout to observe the Spartans at the Olympic Games. While the scout might have been officially there as an observer, his true purpose was to assess the Greek spirit, their unity, and their focus or lack thereof on military preparedness. Herodotus describes the scout's astonishment at the Greeks engaging in athletic contests, while the fate of their nation hung in the balance, illustrating how different cultural values could influence intelligence interpretation. When the massive Persian army finally moved, it was preceded by scouts and engineers who cleared the paths, built bridges, and ensured the logistics for such a vast force. These are specialized intelligence and engineering units crucial for the army's advance. The Greek historian also mentions the use of guides who knew the local terrain, another form of human intelligence. Xerxes' intelligence operations were about macro-level strategic planning and logistics. They were less about individual agents stealing secrets and more about systematic collection of geographic, demographic, and military information needed to move and supply an army of unprecedented scale. He understood that a massive invasion could not succeed without meticulous intelligence gathering on the environment, the enemy, and the logistical challenges. What we still don't know how many specific agents or diplomatic teams did Xerxes deploy for intelligence gathering before and during the invasion. Were there any specific Persian intelligence reports or maps that have survived beyond the Greek historical accounts? Did the Persian intelligence network have a specific name or organizational structure beyond the general military and administrative hierarchy? Number 16. Did ancient warriors use disguise and sabotage to win battles? The shinobi, or ninja, of feudal Japan, specifically from the Sengoku period 15th-16th century CE, are often romanticized but represent a distinct tradition of covert warfare, espionage, and sabotage that has roots in earlier Japanese military culture. While the term ancient can be debated for this period, their methods, philosophy, and role in warfare draw heavily from centuries of Japanese history. They were not conventional warriors, but specialists in what we would call asymmetrical warfare and intelligence operations. And ninja were essentially covert agents trained in a wide range of skills ninjutsu that went far beyond mere combat. Their primary objective was not to engage in open battle, but to gather intelligence, sow discord, assassinate key figures, and sabotage enemy fortifications or supply lines. They were the ultimate practitioners of deception and infiltration. Their intelligence gathering methods were varied. They would infiltrate enemy castles and compounds, often disguised as merchants, monks, entertainers, or even common laborers. Once inside, they would observe troop deployments, listen to conversations, map out fortifications, identify secret passages, and gather information on the morale and leadership of the enemy. They were masters of disguise, adopting the language and customs of the local populace to blend in seamlessly. Sabotage was another key skill. Ninja would be tasked with setting fires, poisoning wells, destroying enemy supplies, or creating diversions to facilitate an attack. This required detailed intelligence on enemy routines and vulnerabilities. Imagine a ninja slipping into a castle at night, setting a fire in the armory, and escaping before anyone even realizes what happened. Assassination was a grim but necessary part of their repertoire. They would target enemy generals, feudal lords, or key advisors whose removal could destabilize an opposing force. This required meticulous intelligence on the target's habits, security, and vulnerabilities. The ninja also engaged in psychological warfare. They would spread rumors, plant false information, and create illusions to demoralize enemy troops or cause panic. This could involve using fireworks, strange sounds, or even specific costumes to create the impression of supernatural forces at play. Sources on ninja history are often problematic, mixing historical fact with later folklore and theatrical exaggerations. However, scholarly works, such as Stephen Turnbull's Ninja: The True Story of Japan's Secret Warrior Cult, and studies by historians like Masaki Hatsumi, who established the Bujinkan martial arts organization, claiming lineage from ninja traditions, attempt to separate the myth from the historical reality. They highlight that the ninja were primarily intelligence operatives and specialists in covert warfare, employed by various daimyo feudal lords during the turbulent Sengoku period. Famous figures like Hattori Hanzo are often associated with ninja clans, though he was more of a samurai general who used ninja. The ninja operated from hidden bases in mountainous regions, often in Iga and Koga provinces, which became synonymous with their skills. They developed specialized tools and techniques for infiltration, including climbing claws, grappling hooks, lock-picking tools, and even underwater breathing devices. Their training emphasized stealth, endurance, observation, and adaptability. The existence of the ninja demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of covert operations, recognizing that sometimes a single well-placed agent could achieve what an entire army could not. They were the invisible hand of warfare, shaping battles and political outcomes through information, deception, and targeted action. Well, we still don't know what were the specific verifiable historical missions or intelligence coups attributed to named ninja individuals or clans. How accurate are the depictions of ninja training and tactics in later sources, given the secrecy surrounding their activities? Did the ninja have a unified organization, or were they primarily independent groups hired by different lords?